Good day to wherever you are. Welcome to Odyssey Unbound. Today we're going to be diving into classical antiquity, and we're going to be discussing Xenia, the ancient Greek concept of hospitality. Now, Xenia, as a Greek word, translates to rites of a guest. It comes from the Greek word xenos, which means guest. Usually, when historians are using the word Xenia, though, they're discussing the concept of hospitality, or as some say, ritualized friendship. In ancient Greece, it was a custom. You were expected to offer hospitality to complete strangers if they showed up at your doorstep. It's an alien concept to us now. I can't imagine like a crack addict showing up to your home and you just feed them and give them bed and board. But such was the life of ancient Greece. And we're going to be diving into the literature that surrounds this and whether it was really a real thing or not. You know, it's one thing to just read something in a book, but did it actually occur in real life? And it did, spoiler alert, but we'll get to that later. We can begin with discussing what the custom really was. It was more than just offering hospitality. If you were a homeowner or a rich noble or even a peasant, a poor, someone who barely owned anything, you were expected, if a guest showed up at your doorstep, to offer them food, a place to sleep, a place to rest, safety, and you were expected to give these things. This was not just a social expectation, it was a religious expectation as well. Zeus, king of the gods, was the overseer of Xenia, and denying Xenia to anyone was an insult to him. But it wasn't completely one-sided. You also had guests were expected to offer a respectable demeanor. They were expected to be extremely respectable, and they were meant to give something in return. So how it would go is there was a process. You would have a stranger appear at your doorstep. They would ask or invoke Xenia, or just out of the kindness of your heart, you offer them a place to stay. You'd bring them in. You would not ask them questions, who they were, where they're from, what they're doing, where they're going. You would simply give them food, let them drink a little bit, let them rest, and then you could start prying into their daily lives. And guests were expected to answer this in truth. Honesty was expected, but also guests were expected to either give gifts or news of the outside world that was relevant to the host, or give a really good story and become an entertainer. So it wasn't just you were expected to take bums off the street and give them food. They were expected to give something in return. And this promoted, I guess, a sense of security amongst the ancient Greek world. You didn't have police the way that we have now. So this promoted, I guess, a cultural safety net. You know, with religion overseeing everybody's moral conduct. Now, was it perfect? Absolutely not. Horrible things occurred still. But we're going to go through various examples of Xenia. The most famous, of course, is within the Odyssey, Homer's epic. But I'm going to begin with the Iliad. And if you're unfamiliar with the Iliad, I highly recommend you read it. It is the foundational block, the foundation, period, of all the Western canon, in my humble opinion. And I believe it's one of the greatest works ever written. It covers almost every single facet of the human experience, except, I would say, romance. But even then, I don't know. There are some parts where You have the character Hector, the Prince of Troy, talking to his wife and taking care of his child. And it's very brief, but there's still that. But still, to me, it's a wonderful story. A few interesting things about the Iliad. This is not a book you would have read back then. Homer didn't create this. He simply compiled it and put it to paper. The Iliad predates Homer by hundreds of years, far longer than him, just way past him. It was a cultural tie. It was something that tied the ancient Greek world together, because the Iliad discusses the story of the fall of Troy, which was located in Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey. All of Greece went to war against Troy because, as the story explains, another prince of Troy named Paris disrespected the Xenia that King Menelaus of Sparta offered to him. What did Paris exactly do? Well, he had an affair with Menelaus' wife and ran off with her, which is completely insulting in of itself. He also took Menelaus' treasure and money. Menelaus happened to have a brother named Agamemnon, who was the king of all of Greece, or at least he oversaw all of the local lords or kings of their areas, and he declared war on Troy, and for 10 years they laid siege to the city. The Iliad picks up on the last year of the war, specifically the rage of Achilles, who was the best fighter amongst the Greeks. There are different reasons for why he was the best fighter. Some say it was skill. Some say that it was because he was a half god. His mother was a nymph. But there's another story where his mother, hearing a prophecy that he was to die, dipped him in one of the ancient Greek rivers of the underworld, which gave him invulnerability, but she held him by the ankle, which is where he received his mortal wound. Now, the Iliad also has another backstory, which is comical, almost. But I won't get too deep into it because I don't want to digress from Xenia. So to quickly give the comical backstory to it, I think it's comical. The king of Troy, Priam, one day received a prophecy that his son Paris would bring the city to ruin. So what does he do? He goes and leaves the baby infant Paris out in the wilderness in hopes that he'll die from the elements, or, I don't know, get eaten by some wolves or something like that. Well, as these stories go, that didn't happen. A shepherd came along and rescued Paris and raised him to be a shepherd. And one day, while Paris was being a shepherd, herding goats, sheep, whatever, nearby, the gods were having a wedding. Thetis, the nymph who is the mother of Achilles, was getting married to a mortal man. And all of the gods were invited to this banquet, except one, and her name was Eris, or Strife. Now, Eris was upset that she was not invited to this banquet, and decided that she would get her vengeance. And she came up with this ingenious plan. She took an apple, and she inscribed upon it, it was a delicious looking apple apparently, the greatest, most succulent apple you could possibly imagine. And she inscribed upon it, "To the fairest," or "to the most beautiful." And she rolled it into the banquet. And by chance, it rolled to the feet of 3 goddesses: Hera, the wife of Zeus; Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare; and Aphrodite, the goddess of love. And of course, when they saw that it said to the fairest, they all thought it was for themselves. Now, all of the gods were smart and didn't answer who they thought was the most fair. So they wanted a neutral party to make this judgment call. And so Paris is found and brought into the banquet, and the three goddesses hound him and say, well, which one of us is the fairest? And so rather than just let him choose, they all try to bribe him. Hera approaches him and says, I'll give you the greatest empire you could possibly imagine. You'll be rich beyond imagining. And, Paris, a young guy, thinks about this and nods. And then it's Athena's turn. She comes up to him and tells him, I'll make you the greatest warrior, the smartest man to walk on this earth. You'll have no equal. And once again, he nods, contemplating this wonderful gift that he could potentially receive. And then Aphrodite comes up and says, I'll give you the most beautiful woman alive. And he just immediately says Aphrodite's the fairest. And from that point on, Hera and Athena vow that they will destroy the Trojans forever. That they will wipe them off the face of the earth because of Paris's insult to them. And again, remember, Paris is the one who goes to Menelaus' house in Sparta, and Helen is considered the most beautiful woman in the world, and so Aphrodite she has Cupid shoot an arrow of love and lust over into Helen, and Helen runs off with Paris. By the way, Helen had a child of Menelaus too. She abandons her child. So, yeah, it wasn't just young love. But I digress. The Trojan War ensues, and lots of men die, and women and men and children suffer because of this. For 10 years, the Greeks lay siege to Troy. They're not successful. They can push close to the city walls, but they can't seem to breach them, and they can't break the Trojans. In the last year of the war, Agamemnon makes a horrible mistake, and he lets his pride get to him. He takes the daughter of a priest of Apollo as a slave, and her father, heartbroken, approaches Agamemnon and begs him to release her. And of course, Agamemnon spits upon him and insults him, and so the priest of Apollo goes to the altar and prays to Apollo. And so Apollo, angered at this insult to him, inflicts the Greek army with a plague. And the plague will not be lifted until the daughter is given back to her father. And so Agamemnon, after taking counsel with his generals, which is one of whom is Achilles, reluctantly gives up the slave girl, but in return, he takes Achilles' slave. And Achilles was genuinely in love with this woman and was actually going to marry her. That's not like, oh, he just says this because he's trying to. No, he is heartbroken that this woman whom he loves is going to go be a slave to this man who, in his opinion, and he made it vocal, has not done any of the hard work that he himself has done. You see, Achilles at this point is the reason why the Greeks are still managing to be somewhat successful. His prowess as a warrior is unmatched. And so, insulted by this, he goes to his mother Thetis and complains to her. He cries, he genuinely weeps, he pulls out his hair, and she goes to Zeus, who Zeus almost had an affair with her, and she convinces Zeus to humble the Greeks. And so, how does Zeus accomplish this? Very simply, he just, while Agamemnon's sleeping, he sends him a dream saying that he'll beat the Trojans the next day if he goes immediately to battle. And so Agamemnon just does exactly that. And the battle shifts between the Greeks winning and losing multiple times, but we need to specifically discuss one of the generals of the Greek army, and his name is Diomedes, who, in my opinion, is the real hero of the Iliad. Just in terms of sheer prowess and honorable attitude, he takes the crown. Now, Diomedes, I have to give some context before I read this passage that discusses Xenia. Diomedes, during the battle, was initially holding back, but is spurned on by Athena. And Athena blesses him because of his faith towards her. And she grants him power, with the only exception being, do not fight any of the gods. Because you see, the Trojan War is almost like a proxy war. You have gods using their children to kill another god's child, and occasionally the god will go down to protect their child or kill somebody. And so it's a crazy, chaotic experience. And so Diomedes, empowered by Athena, manages to almost kill one of the best Trojan warriors, Aeneas, who's the son of Aphrodite. Aphrodite comes down to defend him. He wounds Aphrodite, which I don't know of any Greek myth in which a god or goddess is wounded by a mortal and that mortal is allowed to live. And Diomedes does such that. He then almost kills Hector, who is the reason why Troy has not fallen. But Apollo comes to defend Hector, and Diomedes, high on the slaughter that he's enacting on the Trojans, attacks Apollo 3 times, and the third time Apollo snaps and just kind of lays into him and says, you attack me one more time, it's going to be painful for you. And Diomedes, humbled, backs away. And so he just goes back to killing a bunch of Trojans. And I needed to provide that context because the passage I'm about to read, he talks about not wanting to fight the gods. So, with that being said, we're going to dive into Book 6, I believe. Yes, Book 6 of the Iliad, Hector returns to Troy. And we have a scene where Diomedes there's a no man's land, and he's patrolling it, taunting the Trojans to come and fight him because he's killed so many. The Greeks are behind him, the Trojans in front of him, and in the middle, dead bodies everywhere. And so Diomedes is taunting the Trojans to come and fight him, and no one is stepping forth except one man named Glaucus. And so Glaucus starts to approach Diomedes, and this is where the section I'm going to read picks off. And now Glaucus, son of Hippolochus, and Tydeus' son Diomedes met in the no man's land between both armies, burning for battle, closing, squaring off, and the lord of the war cry Diomedes opened up. Who are you, my fine friend? Another born to die? I've never noticed you on the lines where we win glory, not till now. But here you come, charging out in front of all the rest with such bravado, daring to face the flying shadow of my spear. Pity the ones whose sons stand up to me in war. But if you are an immortal come from the blue, I'm not the man to fight the gods of heaven. Not even Dryas' indestructible son Lycurgus, not even he lived long, that fellow who tried to fight the deathless gods. He rushed at the Maenads once, nurses of wild Dionysius, scattered them breakneck down the holy mountain Nysa. A rout of them strewed their sacred staves on the ground, raked with a cattle prod by Lycurgus, murderous fool. And Dionysus was terrified. He dove beneath the surf, where the sea nymph Thetis pressed him to her breast. Dionysus, numb with fear, Shivers racked his body, thanks to the raucous onslaught of that man. But the gods who live at ease lashed out against him. Worse, the son of Kronos struck Lycurgus blind. Nor did the man live long, not with the hate of all the gods against him. No, my friend, I have no desire to fight the blithe immortals. But if you're a man who eats the crops of the earth, a mortal born for death, here, come closer. The sooner you will meet your day to die. The noble son of Hippolachus answered staunchly, High-hearted son of Tydeus, why ask about my birth? Like the generations of leaves, the lives of mortal men. Now the wind scatters the old leaves across the earth. Now the living timber bursts with the new buds, and spring comes round again. And so with men, as one generation comes to life, another dies away. But about my birth, if you'd like to learn it well, first to last, though many people know it, here's my story. There is a city, Corinth, deep in a bend of Argos, good stallion country, where Sisyphus used to live, the wiliest man alive. Sisyphus, Aeolus' son, who had a son called Glaucus, and in his day Glaucus sired brave Bellerophon, a man without a fault. The gods gave him beauty, and the fine, gallant traits that go with men. But Protus plotted against him. Far stronger, the king in his anger drove him out of Argos, the kingdom Zeus had brought beneath his scepter. Protus's wife, you see, was mad for Bellerophon. The lovely Antea lusted to couple with him, all in secret. Futile. She could never seduce the man's strong will, his seasoned, firm resolve. So straight to the king she went, blurting out her lies. I wish you'd die, Protus, if you don't kill Bellerophon. Bellerophon's bent on dragging me down with him in lust, though I fight him all the way. All of it false, but the king seethed when he heard a tale like that. He balked at killing the man. He'd some respect at least, but he quickly sent him off to Lycia, gave him tokens, murderous signs, scratched in a folded tablet, and many of them too, enough to kill a man. He told him to show them to Antea's father. That would mean his death. So off he went to Lycia, safe in the escort of the gods. And once he reached the broad highlands cut by the rushing Xanthus, the king of Lycia gave him a royal welcome. 9 days he feasted him, 9 oxen slaughtered. When the 10th dawn shone with her rose-red fingers, he began to question him, asked to see his credentials, whatever he brought him from his in-law Protus. But then, once he received that fatal message sent from his own daughter's husband, first he ordered Bellerophon to kill the Chimera, grim monsters sprung of the gods, nothing human, all lion in front, all snake behind, all goat between, terrible, blasting lethal fire at every breath. But he laid her low, obeying signs from the gods. Next he fought the Selimi, tribesmen bent on glory, roughest battle of men he ever entered, so he claimed. Then, for a third test, he brought the Amazons down, a match for men in war. But as he turned back, his host spun out the tightest trap of all. Picking the best men from Lycia far and wide, he set an ambush that never came home again. Fearless, Bellerophon killed them all. Then yes, when the king could see the man's power at last, a true son of the gods, he pressed him hard to stay. He offered his own daughter's hand in marriage, and gave him half his royal honors as the king. And the Lycians carved him out a grand estate, the choicest land in the realm, rich in vineyards and good-tilled fields for him to lord it over. And his wife bore good Bellerophon 3 children, Isander, Hippolochus and Laodamia. Laodamia lay in the arms of Zeus who rules the world, and she bore the god a son, our great commander, Sarpedon, helmed in bronze. But the day soon came when even Bellerophon was hated by all the gods. Across the Aleian plain he wandered, all alone, eating his heart out, a fugitive on the run from the beaten tracks of men. His son Isander, killed by the war god, never sated, a boy fighting the Selimi always out for glory. Laodamia, Artemis, flashing her golden reins, cut her down in anger. But Hippolochus fathered me, I'm proud to say. He sent me off to Troy, and I hear his urgings ringing in my ears. Always be the best, my boy, the bravest, and hold your head up high above the others. Never disgrace the generation of your fathers. They were the bravest champions born in Corinth and Lycia far and wide. There, you have my lineage. That is the blood I claim, my royal birth. When he heard that, Diomedes' spirit lifted. Raising his spear, the lord of the war cry drove it home, planting it deep down in the earth that feeds us all, and with winning words he called out to Glaucus, the young captain. Splendid, you are my friend, my guest from the days of our grandfathers long ago. Noble Aeneas hosted your brave Bellerophon once. He held him there in his halls 20 whole days, and they gave each other handsome gifts of friendship. My kinsman offered a gleaming sword belt, rich red. Bellerophon gave a cup, two-handled, solid gold. I left it at home when I set out for Troy. My father, Tydeus, I really don't remember. I was just a baby when father left me then. That time an Achaean army went to die at Thebes. So now, I am your host and friend and the heart of Argos. You are mine in Lycia when I visit in your country. Come, let us keep clear of each other's spears, even there in the thick of battle. Look, plenty of Trojans there for me to kill, your famous allies too. Any soldier the god will bring in range or I can run to ground. And plenty of Argives too. Kill them, if you can. But let's trade armor. The men must know our claim. We are sworn friends from our fathers' days till now. Both agreed. Both fighters sprang from their chariots, clasped each other's hands, and traded pacts of friendship. So we have an example of Xenia already in the Iliad. We have Diomedes challenging the Trojans to come fight him. He's eager to kill. Approaching comes Glaucus. And Glaucus, after describing his lineage, Diomedes realizes, wait, my grandfather or someone in my family gave your family Xenia. I'm still your host. And so they become friends. That easy, right? That it was enough to stop their deaths. Whether Glaucus would have killed Diomedes or Diomedes would have killed him. And they trade armor, actually, to identify each other on the battlefield so that they wouldn't kill each other. So this is Homer explaining how powerful Xenia is, that it's generational. That if you, out of the kindness of your heart, give this hospitality to one man, his grandchildren, you are still their host, and they are still indebted to you, and you are indebted to give them good hospitality. It's such a foreign concept, but it's a real thing that existed back then. But there are other examples as well. For instance, in Homer's The Odyssey, Xenia being disrespected is a huge theme in the entire epic. And so I'm going to read two examples. One of Xenia being disrespected, and one of Xenia being, I don't know, not the ideal, but just Xenia being performed correctly. And the first is actually in the very beginning of the epic, and then the second will be with Menelaus, who's from the Iliad. In Book 1 of the Odyssey, Athena is upset because it has been 20 years since Odysseus has been home, and Poseidon has made it so that Odysseus cannot return home. After the 10-year war at Troy, Odysseus, on his way home, I don't want to say disrespects. He rightly defends himself against one of the children of Poseidon, who happens to be a horrible monster. And Poseidon, who's just, all the gods are vain, vows that Odysseus would never return home. And so Athena's mad because she really likes Odysseus. He's one of the only Greeks who, besides Diomedes, who she really liked because of his intelligence and his cunning. And so she goes to her father Zeus and begs him, please, let Odysseus return home. Let him go see his family once again. I adore the man and I want him to be happy. And Zeus agrees. He says that Poseidon's anger has been gone off long enough, and he says, go ahead, enact your plan. And so what she wants to do is she wants to prepare a scene where Odysseus is allowed to get vengeance on all the people who are disrespecting him. Because while he's been gone for 10 years, many of the people at Ithaca, which is where Odysseus is from, think that he died during the war or that he died coming back. And so his wife, Penelope, is a widow, and whoever marries her gets to inherit most of the estate. Odysseus had a son when he left, Telemachus, and Telemachus is a 20-year-old, but the Odyssey, because he never had a father, the Odyssey kind of describes him as still being a boy, and this is his, Athena comes to him in the first book in an effort to mature him. And her plan is to arrive disguised and encourage him to go out looking for his father so that he can learn more and just kind of mature. And so we're picking off in book 1 where she immediately begins to disguise herself, and she shows up to Odysseus's house where there are hundreds of suitors trying to marry Penelope. And it's a whole another story in of itself, how she's avoiding that. But just know that she's holding off from marrying because she misses Odysseus and she does not want to get married. And she feels in her heart that he is still alive. And so because of Xenia, Telemachus and Penelope have to give these guests hospitality. And they are totally abusing it. For years, they have been eating out all of his sheep and goats and beef, cows and cattle, and just getting drunk all day and just gambling in his house. And so Athena picks up. And so this is book 1 of the Odyssey. So Athena vowed, and under her feet she fastened the supple sandals, ever glowing gold, that wing her over the waves and boundless earth with the rush of gusting winds. She seized the rugged spear tipped with a bronze point. Weighted, heavy, the massive shaft she wields to break the lines of heroes the mighty father's daughter storms against. And down she swept from Olympus's craggy peaks and lit on Ithaca, standing tall at Odysseus's gates, the threshold of his court. Gripping her bronze spear, she looked for all the world like a stranger now, like Mentes, lord of the Taphians. There she found the swaggering suitors, just then amusing themselves with rolling dice before the doors, lounging on hides of oxen they had killed themselves, while heralds and brisk attendants bustled round them, some at the mixing bowls, mulling wine and water, others wiping the tables down with sopping sponges, setting them all out in place. Still other servants jointed and carved the great sides of meat. First by far to see her was Prince Telemachus, sitting among the suitors, heart obsessed with grief. He could almost see his magnificent father here in the mind's eye, If only he might drop from the clouds and drive these suitors all in a rout throughout the halls, and regain his pride of place and rule his own domains. Daydreaming, so as he sat among the suitors, he glimpsed Athena now, and straight to the porch he went, mortified that a guest might still be standing at the doors. Pausing beside her there, he clasped her right hand, and relieving her at once of her long bronze spear, met her with winged words. "Greetings, stranger. Here in our house you'll find a royal welcome. Have supper first, then tell us what you need." He led the way, and Pallas Athena followed. Once in the high-roofed hall, he took her lance and fixed it firm in a burnished rack against a sturdy pillar. There, where row on row of spears, embattled Odysseus' spears, stood stacked and waiting. Then he escorted her to a high, elaborate chair of honor. Over it draped a cloth, and here he placed his guest, with a stool to rest her feet. But for himself, he drew up a low, reclining chair beside her, richly painted, clear of the press of suitors, concerned his guest, offended by their uproar, might shrink from food in the midst of such a mob. He hoped, what's more, to ask her about his long-lost father. A maid brought water soon in a graceful golden pitcher, and over a silver basin tipped it out so they might rinse their hands, then pulled a gleaming table to their side. A staid housekeeper brought on bread to serve them, appetizers aplenty too, lavish with her bounty. A carver lifted platters of meat towards them, meats of every sort, and set beside them golden cups, and time and again a page came round and poured them wine. But now the suitors trooped in with all their swagger, and took their seats on low and high-backed chairs. Heralds poured water over their hands for rinsing. Serving maids brought bread heaped high in trays, and the young men brimmed the mixing bowls with wine. They reached out for the good things that lay at hand, and when they put aside desire for food and drink, the suitors set their minds on other pleasures, song and dancing, all that crowns a feast. A herald placed an ornate lyre in Phoebus' hands. The bard, who always performed among them there, they forced the man to sing. So, in this scene, we get an example of Xenia being disrespected and honored. Telemachus, who hates the suitors in his dad's house, still, when he sees a guest, goes up and respectfully brings them in. Doesn't ask any questions. He wants to, but he holds off on that because it would be disrespectful to do so. And so you also get a hint of these suitors and their attitude. They're gambling on the front door of Odysseus' house. Odysseus is a king, and they're just gambling on his doorstep because they don't have to work, they don't have to do anything. They come in and immediately just start drinking and partying and dancing, and they force the bard to start singing and playing a song. And it's just disrespectful. And there's other scenes from the Odyssey as well, where Odysseus does return, but he's disguised as a guest, and they just completely mistreat him. They throw food at him, insult him, and it's all to show Xenia being disrespected, and why these suitors are horrific human beings. But there's another scene I'd like to read. It's short as well, that shows Xenia being honored. And in this scene, from book 4, Telemachus heads out to Sparta to meet with King Menelaus and Helen, who's returned home. He wants to ask about his father. And so he arrives at Sparta with his traveling companion, Nestor's son, who was another general in the Greek army during the siege of Troy. And so I just wanted to read this to give another example of Xenia being honored and this being the respectable way to go about it. The travelers, Nestor's shining son and Prince Telemachus, had brought themselves and their horses to a standstill just outside the court when good Lord Etonius, passing through the gates now, saw them there, and the ready aid and arms of Menelaus took the message through whose sovereign's halls, and stepping close to his master, broke the news. Strangers have just arrived, your majesty, Menelaus. 2 men, but they look like kin of mighty Zeus himself. Tell me, should we unhitch their team for them, or send them to someone free to host them well? The red-haired king took great offense at that. Never a fool before, Tonius, son of Boethus. Now I see you're babbling like a child. Just think of all the hospitality we enjoyed at the hands of other men before we made it home. And God save us from such hard treks in years to come. Quick, unhitch their team, and bring them in, strangers, guests, to share our flowing feast. Back through the halls he hurried, calling out to other brisk attendants to follow quickly. They loosed the sweating team from under the yoke, tethered them fast by reins inside the horse stalls, tossing feed at their hooves, white barley mixed with wheat, and canted the chariot up against the polished walls, shimmering in the sun, then ushered in their guests into that magnificent place. Both, struck by the sight, they marveled up and down the house of the warlord dear to Zeus. A radiance strong as the moon or rising sun came flooding through the high-roofed halls of illustrious Menelaus. Once they feasted their eyes with gazing at it all. Into the burnished tubs they climbed and bathed. When women had washed them, rubbed them down with oil, and drawn warm fleece and shirts around their shoulders, they took up seats of honor next to Atrides Menelaus. A maid brought water soon in a graceful golden pitcher, and over a silver basin tipped it out so they might rinse their hands, then pulled a gleaming table to their side. A staid housekeeper brought on bread to serve them, appetizers aplenty too, lavish with her bounty. As a carver lifted platters of meat toward them, meats of every sort, and set before them golden cups, the red-haired King Menelaus greeted both guests warmly. Help yourselves to food, and welcome. Once you've dined, we'll ask you who you are. But your parents' blood is hardly lost in you. You must be born of kings, bred by the gods to wield the royal scepter. No mean men could sire sons like you. With those words, he passed them a rich, fat loin with his own hands, the choicest part that he'd been served himself. They reached for the good things that lay outspread, and when they'd put aside desire for food and drink, Telemachus, leaning his head close to Nestor's son, spoke low to the prince so no one else could hear. Look, Pisistratus, joy of my heart, my friend, the sheen of bronze, the blaze of gold and amber, silver, ivory too, through all this echoing mansion. Surely Zeus's court on Olympus must just be like this, the boundless glory of all this wealth inside. My eyes dazzle. I am struck with wonder. So, here's another example of Xenia from antiquity. And in this case, you have respectful guests and a respectful host. Menelaus doesn't want to know who they are until they've eaten their food and had their drink and they've rested. He bathes them and has women oil them up with olive oil. If you don't know this, the ancient Greeks and the Romans did this too. They would bathe and then coat themselves with olive oil because it was good for the skin and it gave them a nice sheen that they liked. So that's just something that they used to do. But it's just an example of Xenia being honored again and again and again in classical antiquity. So I have one more example from Homer to read over. And this is just the complete and utter violation of Xenia on every level. The scene is Odysseus entering the cave of the one-eyed giant Polyphemus, and Odysseus enters the cave knowing that this creature may be a threat, but because of his customs, expects to be treated well. And so it's a complete violation of Xenia on every level. And I'll go through it after I've read the short section of what's violated immediately. And personally, I think that the Cyclops Polyphemus isn't totally he definitely is at fault, but Odysseus is also at fault as well, and you'll see in a second. So this is from Book 9 and the One-Eyed Giant's Cave. Odysseus speaks, and he's relaying a story to his host. This is actually him relaying his past. And he says, "Our party quickly made its way to his cave, but we failed to find our host himself inside. So he was off in his pasture, ranging his sleek flocks. So we explored his den, gazing wide-eyed at it all. The large, flat racks loaded with drying cheeses, the folds crowded with young lambs and kids, split into 3 groups, here the spring-born, here mid-yearlings, here the fresh sucklings off to the side. Each sort was penned apart. And all his vessels, pails, and hammered buckets he used for milking were brimming full with whey. From the start my comrades pressed me, pleading hard. 'Let's make away with the cheeses, then come back. Hurry, drive the lambs and kids from the pens to our swift ship, put out to sea at once.' But I would not give way. And how much better it would have been. Not till I saw him, saw what gifts he'd give, but he proved no lovely sight to my companions. There we built a fire, set our hands on the cheeses, offered some to the gods, and ate the bulk ourselves, and settled down inside, awaiting his return. And back he came from pasture, late in the day, herding his flocks home, and lugging a huge load of good dry logs to fuel his fire at supper. He flung them down in the cave, a jolting crash. We scuttled in panic into the deepest, dark recess. And next, he drove his sleek flocks into the open vault. All he'd milk at least, but he left the males outside, rams and billy goats out in the high-walled yard. Then, to close his door, he hoisted overhead a tremendous, massive slab. No 22 wagons, rugged and four-wheeled, could budge that boulder off the ground, I tell you. Such an immense stone the monster wedged to block his cave. Then down he squatted to milk his sheep and bleating goats, each in order, and put a suckling underneath each dam, and half of the fresh white milk he curdled quickly, set it aside in wicker racks to press for cheese. The other half let stand in pails and buckets, ready at hand to wash his supper down. As soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores, he lit his fire and spied us in the blaze. "And strangers," he thundered out, "now who are you? Where did you sail from? Over the running sea lanes? Out on a trading spree? Or roving the waves like pirates, sea-wolves raiding at will, who risk their lives to plunder other men?" The hearts inside us shook, terrified by his rumbling voice and monstrous hulk. Nevertheless, I found the nerve to answer firmly. "Men of Achaea we are, and bound now from Troy. Driven far off course by the warring winds, over the vast gulf of the sea, battling home on a strange tack, a route that's off the map. And so we've come to you. So it must please King Zeus's plotting heart. We're glad to say we're men of Atrides Agamemnon, whose fame is the proudest thing on earth these days. So great a city he sacked, Such multitudes he killed. But since we've chanced on you, we're at your knees in hopes of a warm welcome, even a guest gift. The sort that hosts give strangers. That's the custom. Respect the gods, my friend. We're suppliants, at your mercy. Zeus of the strangers guards all guests and suppliants. Strangers are sacred. Zeus will avenge their rites. Stranger, he grumbled back from his brutal heart, you must be a fool, stranger, or come from nowhere, telling me to fear the gods or avoid their wrath. We Cyclops never blink at Zeus and Zeus's shield, storm and thunder, or any other blessed god. We've got more force by far. I'd never spare you in fear of Zeus's hatred, you or your comrades here, unless I had the urge. But tell me, where did you moor your sturdy ship when you arrived? Up the coast or close in? I'd just like to know. So he laid his trap, but he never caught me. No, wise to the world, I shot back in my own crafty way. My ship? Poseidon, god of the earthquake, smashed my ship. He drove it against the rocks at your island's far cape. He dashed it against a cliff as the winds rode us in. I and the men you see escaped a sudden death. Not a word in reply to that ruthless brute. Lurching up, he lunged out with his hands towards my men, and snatching two at once, rapping them on the ground, he knocked them dead like pups. Their brains gushed out all over, soaked the floor, and ripping them limb from limb to fix his meal, he bolted them down like a mountain lion, left no scrap, devoured entrails, flesh and bones, marrow and all. We flung our arms to Zeus. We wept and cried aloud, looking on at his grisly work, paralyzed, appalled. But once the Cyclops had stuffed his enormous gut with human flesh, washing it down with raw milk, he slept in his cave, stretching out along his flocks. And I, with my fighting heart, I thought at first to steal up to him, draw the sword at my hip, and stab his chest where the midriff packs the liver. I groped for the fatal spot, but a fresh thought held me back. There at a stroke we'd finish off ourselves as well. How could we, with our bare hands, heave back that slab he set to block his cavern's gaping maw? So we lay there groaning, waiting dawn's first light. So we have a complete violation of Xenia. If you notice, in the other examples that I've read, the host does not ask any questions to his guest. He immediately, the Cyclops though, presses, who are you? Where did you come from? What are you doing? And then he just starts eating them. So that's a complete violation of the customs of Xenia. He also spurns Zeus, who is the god of strangers. And so this is just a complete violation on every level. But I also feel it's kind of strange that Odysseus just shows up in someone's home and then starts eating their food. I'm not certain if that's meant to show him as being... I think Homer might be depicting him as not totally faultless and also kind of stupid. He should know better than to go into a giant cave filled with where a Cyclops lives. But I digress. This is just another example from Homer about the customs of Xenia that were just so ingrained in the ancient Greek world. That is just from Homer. You have other sources as well discussing Xenia. There's various examples of Xenia being displayed in classical antiquity. One of them is the story of Orion's birth. It's one of many stories surrounding his birth, but there's one of a king Hyrieus. Sometimes the myths display him as a poor man, but the story goes that Hyrieus was a widower and childless, and was one day visited by Zeus and Hermes, who were disguised as mortals. and he offered them hospitality, giving them everything he possibly could. And impressed with his kindness and generosity, they revealed themselves as gods and asked him what would he want, and they would grant him one wish, and he just said that he wanted a child, and so Orion came into being. There's another story of Xenia from the poem called Hekali, which is it's a fragment of a larger poem that came from the 3rd century BC, written by a Callimachus. The poem is named after a woman named Hekali, who was a widow who took in the Greek hero Theseus, while he was on his way to slay the Marathonian bull. And once again, she offered him Xenia, gave him the best service and hospitality he could potentially ever ask for. And because of that, the area in which she lived in was devoted to her. So this is another example in classical antiquity of Xenia being honored. But again, we have to ask ourselves, well, is this just only in literature, in myth? Are there any actual real life examples of Xenia? We have a few. If we go to Herodotus, who was born in 484 BC, he wrote a very famous book called The Histories. And he wrote down in the Histories that the Lydian king Croesus accepted an exiled prince named Adrastus as his guest friend. So, at least political Xenia existed. There was also another example, and this is to be taken with a grain of salt, but he says that the Egyptian king Protus, and we have to remember that Herodotus just made everything Greek. There was no Egyptian king named Protus. I don't know what the actual Egyptian name for that pharaoh was, but supposedly he says that the Egyptian king Protus rebuked Paris because Paris fled to Egypt with Helen, and the Egyptian king sent him away because he had violated the Xenia of his host Menelaus. But Herodotus is, while entertaining to read, it's a stretch. A lot of it, what he writes is, I heard from someone who heard from someone who heard from someone, just trust me. So are there any other examples? Well, we have Xenophon, who was alive in 430 to 354 BC. He was a student of the famous Socrates. And he discussed how Xenia was ingrained in Greek culture, and especially in its army as well. Then, through 700 to 100 BC, so far there have been 2,500 inscriptions that we've found that document about politicians hosting ambassadors and citizens from other cities. They're called proxenos, citizens who host other ambassadors and citizens. So this is another example of Xenia, but again, it's more political. We have Aristotle, who is alive, born 384 BC. He declared Xenia as the strongest of all the relationships involving affection, and an affection not meaning romance. And this is found in the Magna Moralia. And it's more of he's not talking about affection as in like romantic attraction, but more of in a friendly friendship manner. How Xenia is the strongest form of that. And so we have all these written examples of that, but it's very difficult to say whether the common person actually practiced Xenia. It's not something that we could easily prove. One last facet of Xenia was that it survived into the Roman Empire. At the time of Octavian Augustus, You had Roman poets discussing Xenia and drawing upon it in their mythology. For instance, the famous Roman poet Ovid and his work Metamorphosis actually retells a origin story of how Xenia came to be, or at least it's one of the at least he's echoing one of the first stories of it. And it's called Bacchus and Philemon. And in this story, Zeus and one other god approach. Yes, sorry, pardon me. Hermes and Zeus approach an old couple named Bacchus and Philemon. The story goes as such. A gentleman is discussing a story and is relaying about how the gods truly do exist and how they are powerful. And he's talking about how where he used to live or travel, there's a swamp that used to be beautiful land. He says, "The might of heaven is vast and knows no bounds, and all the gods' desire has come to pass. In case you doubt me, in the Phrygian hills, a walled-off linden grows beside an oak. I've seen the place myself, for Pythias once sent me to his father Pelops' realm. Nearby there is a swamp, once land for homes, but now the marshy haunt of gulls and coots. There Jove, in mortal guise, went with his son, the heir of Atlas, staffless and unwinged. 1,000 doors they knocked on, seeking rest. 1,000 doors were locked, but one flung wide, a reed-roof shack where old Philemon lived with pious Bacchus, both alike in years. There they had wedded youth, there shared old age, and knowing they were poor, there eased their lot by thinking their condition no disgraced. No slaves nor masters could be sought inside, for those two likewise ordered and obeyed. When those from heaven approached this humble home and entered, stooping through its tiny door, the old man laid a bench and bade them rest. Then Bacchus cushioned it with a homespun cloth, raked out the cooling ashes from the hearth, stoked leaves between the coals of yesterday, and coaxed a flame back with her aged breath. Dry twigs and broken branches from the eaves she chopped and set beneath a copper pot, then peeled a cabbage head her husband picked from their well-watered plot. Meanwhile, he forked a paltry pork loin from the blackened beam, where he'd long kept it hanging, shaved a slice, and brought the shaven rasher to a boil. The intervening hours were passed in talk, while time flew by unfelt. Down from its nail they took their beechwood tub by its stiff strap and poured in water for their guests to bathe. Then they laid down a mattress stuffed with sedge across a frame with feet of willow wood, and covered it with fabrics only used for feasts, though even these were cheap and old, as fits a willow couch. The gods reclined. With shaky hands and hitched-up skirts, she set the table. Finding one leg not as long, she used a pot to even out its length, then wiped green mint across its even top, and served Minerva's virgin mottled fruits, and bitter autumn cherries soused in wine, and endives, radishes, and lumps of cheese, and eggs turned lightly over lukewarm coals, all in clay crocks, whose lack of silver trim decked both the wine bowl and their beechwood cups, whose insides were inlaid with yellow wax. And soon the hearth supplied their steaming feast, while wine of no great age was poured again, then cleared to serve the small and second course of nuts and figs and wrinkled dates and plums, and basketfuls of apples, sweet to smell, and purple grapevines, all arranged around a gleaming honeycomb, while, over all, their cheerful looks belied their poverty. They meanwhile marked how, when the bowl was drained, the wine refilled, each time all on its own. Then Bacchus and Philemon knelt in fear, and prayed with awe and dread and upturned hands, beseeching pardon for the meager meal. As hosts of godly guests, they would have slain the single goose that watched their humble home. But, fleet of flight, it wore the old ones out, at last eluding them and fleeing, it seemed, unto the gods who bid them spare its life. We too are gods, and justly shall we smite this faithless land, they said, but we shall spare you from that punishment. Now leave your home, and walk with us up that tall mountainside. Both acquiesced, and leaning on their staffs, they struggled up the mountain step by step. When they were but a bow shot from the top, they glanced behind and saw that all around had sunk into a swamp, except their house. And while they gaped and grieved their neighbors' fates, their home, too cramped for even two, transformed into a temple. Pillars turned from posts. The roof of straw was yellowed into gold. The doors grew carved, and marble paved the ground. Then Saturn's son said kindly, "Good old man, good worthy wife, now ask us what you wish." Once Bacchus and Philemon talked it through, he gave their shared decision to the gods. "We ask to be your priests and temple guards, and, having lived in harmony, to die in the same hour, that I may never see her tomb, nor shall she have to bury me." Their wish came true. They lived and watched the shrine, till, spent with age, they chanced one day to walk the sacred steps, remembering things past, when Bacchus saw Philemon sprouting leaves, as Bacchus did before Philemon's eyes, and as tree-top thickened round each face, both cried as one, "Farewell, dear spouse," before their mouths as one were overgrown with green. And the Bithyans still point out that pair of tree trunks, side by side. I heard this from an old honest man, who had no cause to lie. Myself, I saw the branches decked with wreaths, placed more, and said, "Those loved by gods are gods, and worshippers receive their worship too." So, this is Ovid in the Roman Empire discussing Xenia, which obviously must still have existed in some capacity or was still a cultural icon of ancient Greece, since he's drawing upon their mythology. So, yeah, Xenia was a major component of ancient Greek life. Now, interestingly, Xenia isn't just found in ancient Greece. The idea of being a good host and accepting guests is found in Arab countries prior to the formation of Islam, and it's still found in Islam. It was found with the ancient Celts. They even had laws saying that you needed to take care of guests. It was found in the Bible, and it was found with the Norse. Every culture, even in China, there were laws, and Confucius had written about the proper way to take care of guests. So this is nothing new, but it seems to have died out entirely, at least in the Western hemisphere of the world. I'm unsure what's going on in the Eastern, so I could be totally wrong about that too. But it's such an alien but fascinating concept. I could just never see that happening now in our current society. And it's just a fascinating but alien concept that all the Western civilization built itself upon. So even though we don't practice Xenia, and even though it's gone, the world we live in was partially built upon that. And I think it's just something important to remember, because we often have this tendency to project our moral standards on past societies and past cultures and past civilizations. And did they do horrible things? Yes. But you also get these glimpses of a society that just no longer exists anymore. We talk about kindness in our modern world, but we don't. How do we really express it? Would you be willing to take in a stranger? I wouldn't. I'll be the first to admit that. I'm not going to take in some random stranger into my home and give them my food. It's outlandish to me. But this was a concept in the ancient world. And it's something that even though there were more important things, even though there were more notable things, this is something that we came from. Our world was built upon this. So, with that all said, always keep an eye to the future, but never forget to look back to the past and admire what has occurred. And you never know, maybe in the future Xenia will make a comeback. Until then, enjoy yourself, be wise, and appreciate the beauty that has passed and is coming. Bye-bye.